My name is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast.
Thanks, Norm. It's an honor to be here, and it's been fun to work with you over the years.
Norm Volsky, and today we are joined by Gregg Mauro, who is the program director at the Conference Board, the preeminent conference that many of our viewers go to and know and love. Welcome, Gregg.
Thanks, Norm.
So, Gregg, we'll jump
I
into
love the gloves.
You joined the Conference Board about 20 years ago. I think, the Conference Board as an organization has changed quite a bit over time. I'm sure, your responsibilities have changed over time. Walk me through just some of the changes that have gone on at Conference Board from the time you started to now.
Yeah, the Conference Board is a pretty complex organization. We're a nonprofit, non-advocacy group, membership-based. And I work in the conferences division. So I can speak to that, and specifically to the Employee Healthcare Conference, which is the event that you're talking about.
Yep.
We've been running that since 2000. We started it it'll be 24 years ago as of the next event. So it's the 24th annual. Really proud of that. And that's evolved. The first one we ran had about 100 people in New York only. And it resonated because there was a need for more education on employee health, based mainly on the expense of it. Companies are seeing significant expense. And then 2020 and 2001, we expanded it to New York and San Diego. Usually with our successful events, we'll do an East Coast, West Coast version. And then we've been doing it in New York and San Diego since then. And I was looking back over the early agendas of the conference. And as you can imagine, it was all about cost containment. It was all about how do we save money in this space. And then it evolved over the years into, then it went into cost shifting. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that. And it's true for the conference. It was, how do we get employers to get a little bit of skin in the game so they know, get them more responsible, to put it in a nice way. How do we get them to be a little bit more responsible about their health and taking better care of themselves, with the goal of being, to reduce the expense that companies have to incur to keep them healthy. And then it evolved a little bit further. And I think people realized, executives at these large organizations realized that a healthier employee is better for the company, not only just a better thing to do. They're more productive. They're on the job longer. They take less time off. A non-healthy employee is an unproductive employee. People know that. And I think that the thinking went from, let's do this for the goodness of our people because we care about them. Yep. And I think that's where we are now. Obviously, cost savings is always going to be an issue, for sure, from the employer side as well as the employee side. It's very expensive. It's very inefficient. And, we've talked about ways over the years of how to make those things a little bit different. But, that's a tough nut to crack. So what we're seeing now is a lot of point solutions that address things like chronic care management, MSK issues, cardiovascular issues, women's health, fertility management, you name it. We're seeing a lot of really interesting things that address mental health, of course, addiction management, financial wellness, which is really interesting. So it's evolved over the years pretty significantly. And I think now what we're really talking about is the whole person and how to keep them healthy, and extending even beyond the employee into their family.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's super true. And, ultimately what you shared about first it being just cost containment, then it's about, hey, a healthy employee is a more productive employee. But then I think even there's a next layer of an employee that feels like their employer truly cares about them is one that's a lot more loyal to their employer and probably going to improve retention over time. And I think that's the holy grail of a lot of these point solutions. and benefits is, by offering these amazing benefits to your employees, you're allowing yourself to be in the position to retain them longer over time.
For sure.
So tell me about the origins of Conference Board. We did a little prep for this, and you told me the organization's been around for over 100 years. Walk us through how it started.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting story. The Conference Board was founded in 1916. And this was the progressive era of the United States. There were Teddy Roosevelt from 1900 to 1908 brought in this progressive way of thinking about how government and business work together.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming off the Gilded Age when companies had kind of free reign and workers had no rights. So there were three things that happened that kind of spurred the creation of the Conference Board. One was the Los Angeles Times plant bombing in 1910, 21 people dead. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911, 146 people died. And the Ludlow massacre in Colorado with 21 dead. And these were all labor versus management disputes for the most part, some having to do with unions. So the Conference Board in 1916 was founded by the presidents of AT&T and General Electric. And their goal was that companies need to do better. They need to treat their workers better. And they gathered. The first event of the Conference Board was a conference in upstate New York. So we've been doing conferences, literally for almost 108 years now.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is incredible. And what's the mission of the organization at this point in its growth?
So we're a membership-based company. It's a corporate membership. And we're a think tank, and we deliver trusted insights to help our member companies improve the performance and better serve society. Spokesman for the so-called progressive wing of the business community and produced hundreds of research reports on economic and social issues facing the United States. That's what the Conference Board started out. As I mentioned, it was the progressive era, and that's how things started. Another interesting fact, when the United States entered World War I in 1917, the National War Labor Board, formed by President Wilson, asked the NICB, back then we were the National Industrial Conference Board, to formulate plans that would keep war industries running and strife-free. And the recommendations based on cooperation between representatives of employers, employees, and government were adopted in full. And during that war, the NICB conducted pioneering research into workers' comp laws and the 8-hour workday and established the U.S. Cost of Living Index. So a very rich, storied history. Kind of makes you proud to work for an organization that's been around so long and has done such interesting and great things.
Excellent. All our Gen Z viewers are probably going to curse the Conference Board for an 8-hour work day, but ultimately back then, they were working more than 8 hours a day. So, for all those younger 20-somethings watching this podcast, I guess the expectation of hours of work a day has gone down over time for the general population. So, How did you find your way to the Conference Board?
So I graduated college I started college in the late 80s and went to school in New York City, and everything was great. Business was great. People were wearing these beautiful suits. Everybody looked happy. Everybody was making tons of money. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. When I graduate, I'm going to get into this. Of course, I graduated in the early 90s when there was a recession.
Yep.
And there were no jobs to be had. So I answered an ad, this is going to age me, but I answered a classified ad in the New York Times for business research. And I thought that would be interesting. I always like to research and write. Turns out it was for a conference company, not the Conference Board. There were a lot of conference companies back then. This one in particular is a part of Informa Group now. And then I worked there for about 5 years, and then a bunch of other companies here and there. And just really didn't like the business. It wasn't, those companies weren't organized around a specific mission. It was more like they see a need, they see it, people need information, they put a conference together. We were doing a program director back then, you would do one conference a month. And it was just like a factory. And at this point, I had about 8, maybe 9 years experience. And I thought, I just don't like this business. I need to do something else.
Yep.
And then I started looking into it, and I thought, wow, if I start fresh and a brand new career at that age with that level of experience, it's going to be a big hit. So I had always heard about the conference board. In conference circles, the conference board was always this storied organization. And I thought, all right, if I can get a job there and work there, and if I don't like the business there, then I don't like the business.
Yeah.
So I sent my resume in and unsolicited, and they were coincidentally looking. And that was 1998. And I got a job there.
At that point, and you used a fax machine, or did you walk it over? Did you mail it?
They were moved. They had just, I think the last carrier pigeon was phased out when I got there. But it was very fancy because they had the kind of fax machine where you could
document in email form.
Yeah, we were able to email, but we did have faxes. But we had the fancy ones where you could put the stack of paper in, and it would fax them all at once instead of standing there one at a time. So that was 1998, and I've been there ever since. So great organization. The people, there's people who've been there for a long time. You could tell how good an organization is based on how long people stay.
I would agree. Yeah, in my line of work, that's a very good indicator. My usual indicator of what companies I want to work with are the ones where it's impossible to get their top people out. If I can't recruit their top people, I'm like, well, if I can't beat them, join them, and they must be a great place to work. And I would be doing all my network a favor by placing them at a company that a lot of people, enjoy and love. So I have a couple of good examples of that over the years. So when you started at Conference Board, we're talking, early 2000s was when you launched, the first employee benefits, type focused conference. How has the digital health landscape and the vendor world changed from those first conferences to what you see now?
Well, I don't think digital health existed back then at all. I remember, I don't remember what year this was, but I remember, and I think it was Amwell, if I'm not mistaken, they brought to one of our conferences this physical box.
I remember
where
seeing
there was
those. Yep.
There was a screen in it. There was a blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, and they were demonstrating. They didn't call it telehealth back then, but that's what it was. And it was, they were showing that you could install these boxes, for lack of a better word, in your company. Because we have, there's a lot of, and back then this was a big issue, is you had employee populations of workers who were on a factory floor or were driving a truck. They didn't have access to a computer like we do all the time, and some still don't. So companies were trying to provide care for their employees, but they couldn't figure out how, if they're not working, they're not on the job, that they have to go to the doctor on their own time, which wouldn't happen. Maybe they lived in an area where it wasn't accessible. So I remember that box, and I remember the video would come up and the doctor would be on the video, and they were demoing it. And it was, people were just flabbergasted and never seen anything like that before. So obviously that's evolved. That's you don't need the box anymore, but telehealth is certainly an issue. But and I think that's when digital health really started to come in, and you saw a lot of different applications for it, going forward from there.
That's fantastic. What are some vendors you met personally in the early years that you had some early belief in that, proved your gut feeling right?
A couple come to mind that I was really impressed with. One was Best Doctors, Evan
Mhm.
Falchuk's group. They sold to Teladoc.
Oh yeah,
I know
and
you
now
had him
Evan's
on,
running Family First, who I've had on this podcast.
which Family First wasn't involved early on, obviously, because they just formed, but they were at our conference a few years ago. Um, and it's almost whatever Evan does is going to be successful. I
I
mean,
would
clearly,
agree.
but I love how, Best Doctors, everybody knows who they are, and Teladoc and so forth. But with Family First, I really like how he's looking at the whole person.
Hmm.
Um, that organization, your kids, your parents, all these things have an effect on your health on the job. Or maybe not your health personally, but definitely your engagement and presenteeism levels on
Yeah,
your job. So I really like that. There's a lot of companies who are looking at caregiving, especially a lot of the conference attendees these days are in the sandwich generation. They're taking care of parents as well as their own kids and their own health on top of that. So it's a big need. I think Progeny's work is really incredible. Judy Stadelbauer's group is doing some great things. Grocker, Laura Bornstein
hmm,
in the wellness space, bringing wellness activities digitally to people no matter where they are. Hinge Health, Dan Perez's group, they were very early on with us. I have a story about him. It's not him, but the company in general. It's had to be 7 or 8 years ago, got a call from someone there, and they needed to get an exhibit space at the conference, and we just didn't have anything. We did. It was in a really, really bad spot.
hmm.
And they said, I showed them the floor plan, and they said, we'll take it. We need to be there. And this with Gabriel, too. They were both there. And I remember Dan doing demos himself in that exhibit space. And they made the best of it. And they've always been great to work with since then. I heard him on your podcast, and he was talking about how he's kind of stepped back a little bit. But I remember him doing those demos, and I was so impressed. They're so engaged from the beginning. And what he was talking about, and he said something really interesting. He was something like above 90% of all MSK surgeries are voluntary.
Hmm.
And I think addressing that need the way he's doing it with at home, physical therapy is just really interesting. Um, in the Grail for cancer screenings, I
Hmm.
think they're doing really excellent work. Um, Financial wellness over the past few years has come up as an issue for us, and in that space, I like what Level's doing.
Hmm.
Um, And then we had besides the employee healthcare conference that we do in the spring, we also do an annual health and productivity forum. And we do that in partnership with IBI,
Hmm.
the Integrated Benefits Institute. That's Kelly McDevitt's group.
I'm having her
And
on
we
in a
did that.
few weeks for the podcast. So
Oh,
you're
awesome.
naming all the
Yeah.
people that have either been on the podcast or will be soon. So it's funny.
Oh, good. Good, good, good. Yeah. So Kelly's group, we partnered with them, and we started that in 2019. And at the conference we just did in September, two organizations spoke on a topic that, if you asked me 10 years ago, would this ever be on the agenda? I would have thought you were crazy. And Thea and Tara Mine are talking
Hmm.
about ketamine supported therapy, specifically for PTSD. Um, and I thought that was really the response to that was so encouraging, because it's very important, very relevant, and I think these alternative therapies are becoming a little bit more mainstream. The science is behind it, and I really like the fact that people are connecting with it.
Fantastic. Really, really good. I remember it was March of 2019, or sorry, 2020, excuse me. And we're in New York. I'm at the conference board in New York, and all of a sudden the NBA shuts down, the MLB shut down. I remembered I was planning on going to a show on Broadway that night. All of Broadway was shut down, and people were panicked, like whether they were going to be able to get home or not. Just as like every news channel imaginable was going, pretty much in panic mode over like COVID and the pandemic. So, I'm sure that was a stressful moment for you, being responsible
I
for
don't
these
really remember
thousands
that.
of people. But, catch me up to, how the conference has evolved post pandemic, post COVID-19.
So so the 2019 conference was the biggest conference that we ran
Mm-hmm.
to date. It grew every year by a little bit. And then around 2014, 2015, the growth kind of exploded.
Mm-hmm.
So 2019 was our biggest year. 2020, we actually put curbs on attendance for 2020
Mm-hmm.
because we thought it would be too big. So I felt, and this is just my feeling from having been in the business for so long, I felt in 2019 there was a little bit of a fatigue. People just, they had to go to conferences. The feeling that I had is we have to be here. We don't really want to be, but there's really no other way to get this. And, it was record attendance, so it was fine. And then, of course, 2020 happened. We did the conference again in 2021, but we moved it from the early spring to late fall. So restrictions had been lifted for, to a certain extent. And I think they haven't really changed the way we run them.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's changed, though, is I think people had a newfound respect for the in-person meeting. Because prior to and during, obviously, everything went virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's funny, the news reports, we'll never shake hands again. We'll never leave our houses again. Nobody needs to go to an office again. Nobody needs to, and of course that was all ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 2021 event, we scaled it back. It was about half the number that we usually have. And I remember what we did was we had these stickers that you could put on your badge,
Mm-hmm.
red, green, and yellow. So the red meant stay back. The yellow meant, and then the green was all bets are off. Do whatever you want. And I have a picture to this day. So we had these. They came on, one sticker pad had each of the three colors, and I have a picture of the table at the conference with all the sticker pads laid down, and only the green stickers are missing. Nobody used the yellow or the red.
Uh-huh.
So people were, they just wanted to be back to normal. And since then, 2022, we went back to regular schedule. Record attendance kind of matched what we had in 2019. And then 2023 was the highest ever. And right now we're in the process of putting the 2024 together, and we have to be really careful about how many people we have, because our goal is to make sure that people can get around, visit with exhibitors, visit with each other, find each other. So we don't want to turn the conference into a trade show. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
That's not what we want to do. So I think that what's come out of it is people have kind of, they realize what they missed out on, and they're just back at it in full force.
Yeah, I think you really don't know what you have until it's gone. So, I think people pre-pandemic were like, oh, I have to go to this. Now it's like, I get to go to this. I get to see my friends, my former colleagues, my current colleagues that I hardly see, in person, my customers, my prospects, maybe some patients, that have used some of these platforms. So, I think, the pandemic has really reminded us, to be really appreciative and really thankful for some of the relationships and the in-person interaction that we get the opportunity to have at certain points in the year and not feel like it's a chore. So, it gave, I think, all of us a lot of good perspective. Um,
And there's one other thing on top of that, Norm, is people are seeing colleagues that they don't see
yeah,
normally.
absolutely.
So the people they work with, Yeah, so that's another aspect of it. So it's this gathering place where you're meeting with your colleagues, your the people that you do business with, people in your industry who you want to see and meet with. It's just it's a unique opportunity for people to connect.
Yeah, and I feel it's my responsibility to go to these shows so that, if someone needs to build a team at one of these vendors, that, I'm there for them, and, they get to see me in person, and it's not just a Zoom. So, always fun time. The bar's always packed, regardless, rain, shine, snow. If the conference board's happening, the hotel bar is jamming. So it's all good stuff. So why is conference board, in your opinion, the premier conference for benefits leaders at Fortune 1000 companies? Why do these people
I,
come back again and again and again?
I think that the one thing that we do that keeps it fresh is we make sure there's a balance between employers and vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal always is to have more employers than vendors. That's the number one goal for us. And it's a lot more difficult than it sounds. It sounds like it should be easy, but it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
because we have a lot of vendors that want to be involved, and we're flattered by that. And if I could, I would let everybody in. It's very difficult to say no and to kind of pick through, but the employers want to learn from each other. We have a requirement that every presentation has to be a case study,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be about the employer's work. So the employers come because they want to hear what each other is doing. And I always explain it. It's the people come for two reasons. If you're the head of HR or the head of benefits at your company, either you're coming because you want to make sure that what you're doing is on track with what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all Fortune 1000 type companies. It's not really a mid-market or a small company event. And the conference board in general, I think most of our work is really geared towards that crowd.
Yep.
And the other reason people come is because they may be looking at changing their mental health solution, or they may want to add something in, like chronic condition management or whatever the case is. So so as a program director, my goal is to make sure that if you, Norm, are coming to learn about mental health solutions, chronic care, MSK, whatever, the agenda is lined up so that you can go to every session on those topics without any overlap.
Yep.
So you'll be able to hear from people in positions like yours and hear what they're doing. And we close it to the press. We don't allow any reporters in. So all of these executives feel free to talk about what they're doing in that environment, because, these aren't competitive secrets people are sharing.
Yeah.
And it's good. People, you want to brag about what you're doing, obviously, but also what you're doing is good for the employee. And if somebody else can use that, then all the better.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the future of the conference? What are you going to be doing in 5-10 years that you're not doing now?
That's such a good question. We have a lot of ideas. How to make them happen is the question, and we're continually working on that. But making it easier for people to connect on site would be one of the goals. And I think technology is going to provide an answer to that. I've heard of events where they do meeting matchers and all these kind of gimmicks where you have to meet with X number of vendors and I don't agree. I don't like that. I think it's a little bit too forced. What we want to create is an environment where people naturally can connect.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a conference app that helps that. And kind of going back to the last question you asked me, there's another aspect to that I didn't mention that kind of ties into this. What we also want to do is, we know that the HR and the benefits executives are there to meet with vendors that they use or new vendors that they want to meet with. So we always try to have new organizations sponsor the event that haven't been involved in the past. startups as much as we can. We feature them in a vendor showcase that we started doing a bunch of years ago where they get to do a pitch.
Yep.
We want to balance the learning from peers with meeting with vendors who can help you deliver those solutions. So go to a session and listen to how company XYZ brought in this vendor and has seen results and cost savings or better engagement, lower absenteeism, and provide networking time, because these executives, they're busy. They don't have a lot of time to go to be out of the office. So we keep the event to a day and a half. It's very short.
Mm-hmm.
Sessions are 40 minutes long, so those are short as well. And we try to, it's packed, you go home exhausted from this, clearly.
Yes.
But the idea is you can come in for a day and a half and you can get as much as you want to get out of the event as you possibly can. It's all provided there for you. And it's kind of up to you what you want to make out of it.
I think another thing I love
But
about the event is, it is smaller, it is curated, it is easy to navigate. There are conferences I've been to where after, 4 days and, maybe a total of 50 miles walking from one thing to the other, I'm crawling to my chiropractor. Hey, I need to get, on the adjustment table because I can hardly walk. I'm exhausted. My body's like about to give out. Conference board's very comfortable and plenty of seating area, and it's just easy. It's low stress, and it's just a bunch of people who are like-minded. Who all have the goal and helping patients ultimately, and employees live better lives. So really really enjoyed that.
You definitely get your steps in.
Yeah, but there's others where too many steps. You're needing the icy hot after a day walking everywhere. So, anyways, what are some bold predictions you have, for the digital health space in the coming decade? Since you've just, seen many companies come through your programming, and you have a very keen eye for what's next.
I think consolidation is what's next.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many point solutions. There's so many different, it leads to a lot of confusion on the employer side. And I can't imagine that we won't see significant consolidation in those spaces to make things a little bit more manageable. And I think it's starting now, for different reasons. But I think looking over time, that's another thing that's changed about the conference is there's a lot of different point solutions, and a lot of these organizations are offering very innovative, interesting, needed things for employees, and the employers have a difficult time communicating them and getting the employees to use these solutions. That's, if there's one thing that I've heard over and over again, it's and there's sessions on this, how to engage employees, how to get them involved, how to get the message to them, communicate. Always a difficult thing, and that no matter what we're talking about, that's been an issue over time for sure. So I think that the industry is going to have to figure out a way to make this a little bit more simple. Okay. To be frank.
Love that. I'm going to ask you a question I have not asked a single person on this podcast. I've had 20 plus episodes, but I've seen you at conferences. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the years. I think you're one of the best dressed people that I've seen in the industry. What are your favorite, clothing brands? What are certain publications that you look for to, make sure you're always dressed and snazzy? You always got the, haircut, the recent haircut. What's the secret, Gregg?
Ellen K. Taylor's out of Hong Kong.
Okay.
And I'll send you the details for this. Keep in mind, Norm, that I wear a suit 4 times a year.
Okay, so this is your opportunity.
That's not what I look like
to wear it. Okay. I knew you would come dressed to the nines, so I didn't even try to compete. I just have my sweatshirt. It's cold in Cleveland. But, sometimes I dress up a little bit, but I knew I couldn't hold a candle to you.
That Ellen K. Taylor's out of Hong Kong is fantastic. Their prices are reasonable, and they make everything to fit you perfectly. And they come to the United States. They go through different cities. So they'll set up in a hotel. You go in, you pick your fabric. The two gentlemen that run it are about my age, so they kind of know age appropriate, what you should be wearing, not so much for style, but more like you want to be comfortable and dress appropriate. But that, and I have a bit of an Hermes tie addiction.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, I'll have to share this with my wife. She buys most of my clothes. So, with holidays coming up, this is very, very good timing to have this information. Very important information. So, I ask everyone on this podcast, how do you practice what we preach? Obviously, we're in health and benefits. We live it, we breathe it, we sleep it. Our livelihoods, kind of depend on the industry. But how do we, live it ourselves? Like, what are we doing from a stress reduction and an exercise regimen? So, what do you do to kind of keep you, level between the ears, to allow you to do great work?
I play tennis about 3 times a week, and I do yoga, combination of either core power yoga or Bikram yoga about 3 times a week. So I usually take a day off, but I kind of mix the yoga with the tennis. Massages help, especially at my age. Things start to, hurt more than they used to, especially from all the activities I do. That's a great stress reliever, for sure. But yeah, staying in shape is really important to me. Eating well is important. I feel like if you're not physically healthy, you just can't. I mean, for me personally, it's tough to think. It's tough to function. If you have your physical health kind of buttoned up, then everything else I think is a lot easier.
All right. Well, although it's not her full-time job, my wife is, part-time yoga instructor, in addition to her full-time job. So if you ever want a yoga teacher that teaches a class before the conference board events start in the mornings, she can come tag along and she can do a yoga class for any, benefits leader or vendor person that wants to get a little workout in before the, opening remarks and the first breakfast. So just throwing it out there, no pressure. But if you want, a yoga
Fantastic.
teacher, I think we can make that work. So, I know she'd be
Awesome.
excited. So keep us posted on that. And then, you mentioned healthy eating. I ask everyone, like, are there any healthy recipes you and your family make that, can maybe inspire someone else, to eat a little healthier and, eat a little cleaner? What's popular in the Mauro household?
The Morrow household is kind of, I have two teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
So dinner is always a moving target. 1 week, my daughter likes chicken, so we make it, but then we find out, well, she likes it, but when it's not on the bone, and then my son likes fish, but my daughter doesn't like fish. So I don't know that we have any recipes that are going to inspire anyone that's listening. I do think that family time at dinner is important. So how about I go in a different direction? I mean, we do roasted fish, clean, organic vegetables, that kind of thing. Boring, healthy, but boring.
Okay.
But I live here in Charleston, and Charleston is a fantastic food city.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like everybody's coming here. So we go out a lot and we eat healthy even out. I mean, there's great options. So what I thought is, how about I give you some restaurant recommendations for Charleston? All right. For French, Maison, hands down, number one. There's another place called Chez Nous here. That's fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful building. They restored an old, I think it's an 18th century little townhouse. Gorgeous. For Italian food, Melfi's is fantastic. Coda del Pesce and Isle of Palms, if you're at the beach, or Obstinate Daughter on Sullivan's Island. If you're at the beach there, those both fantastic. Sorelle is a new place on Broad Street in a beautiful, beautiful space, fantastic Italian food. Indaco on King Street is great, excellent pizzas, pastas, really healthy food. There's a place called Shiki on East Bay Street. The sushi is unbelievable fresh, and they have a sake list, which is pretty hard to find. And then for one of the most eclectic, interesting meals you're going to have anywhere is a place called Sorghum and Salt,
Okay.
downtown Charleston. That's just fantastic. Blows my mind every time we go there.
I went to a raw bar in downtown Charleston with my wife, my cousin, his wife, and our two. Actually, at the time, they were both about 1 year old. Now my daughter's 2 years old. So this was like a little over a year ago. I forget what it was called. It was like whatever their address was, and then raw. So like, let's just
167 Raw.
That's it. It was good, really good.
Yeah, yeah, I've been there. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a cool vibe. They had a great cocktail menu. Yeah, it was a great meal. Still remember it. Well, you're a fellow foodie. This is great. So, Gregg, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everything you and the conference board do. I think ultimately a lot of innovation is, kind of learned and exposed at the conference board events. And, I think a lot of employees get health benefits, from vendors being there, and then, their benefits leaders seeing what's out there and, putting it on the roadmap for things they're going to buy and implement in the coming years. So again, Gregg, thank you for joining us on the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast, and thanks for everything you do. Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.